Welcome to the Purpose Cycle podcast. This podcast helps listeners realize and manifest their dream lives. Here's a little taste of what we've got in store for you today.
So I think it's really important now we have the internet that we can connect with those people, even if you don't know anyone like that in your real life right now. You can look online for other people who are just like you. You know, whether I think it's really important to have to look for representation of yourself, like whatever your race is, your gender, your age. Look for people that are living in their purpose, in their higher self, and living the life that you would dream to live, because then it's showing to you that it's possible. Each new level that thought can come up again. You know, each new goal you reach, it's like, oh wow, what if you don't continue to reach that? What if you go back? What if you lose it? And that's really what the fear of success is for me.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Purpose Cycle podcast. My guest today helps female spiritual entrepreneurs manifest complete freedom. Her journey from depressed, anxious and self-harming to owning multiple businesses, traveling the world and helping others is an inspiring story that I cannot wait to share with you all. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, Minnie Courtney. Minnie, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for coming on. And would you like to elaborate on any of those points and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you kind of set the stage there, I was really having a bit of a difficult time quite a few years ago now, because I've been on this path for quite a while at this point. And I noticed as I moved through it that it was literally so common, and to different levels of severity, but all of these people who were struggling with anxious thoughts, overthinking, worrying about the future, just not being happy in their life and not really knowing the way to move through it in a healthy way and actually get where they want to go, and kind of getting stuck in numbing it with just ignoring it, just go to work, get on with your life, drink some alcohol, or do whatever you need to do to just kind of keep existing, but not actually thriving and actually feeling free in their life. So I basically then decided, you know what, I would love to continue sharing this message with people on the internet, because I've been running an Instagram account for a while, which I kind of shared a lot of my travel on there and positivity and inspiration and things like that. And through there, I connected with a lot of different people. And as I said, I saw these things coming up. So I wanted to really be able to make a bit more of an impact. And that is when I moved into what I'm doing now, which is manifestation coaching, and actually working with people to kind of guide them through that and guide them to their purpose and how they can actually achieve those things.
Oh, fascinating. I liked the way you said about, obviously, some people are just going through their lives understanding that this is happening. And I often compare those sorts of situations, because I've been through that myself, where quite often we can drive somewhere and then we'll forget how we actually got there, because it's all almost become like so second nature. And you think, how on earth did I get from there to there? And life can be quite like that. We can sort of get somewhere in our lives, and hopefully these people who are listening at the minute and people who you're helping don't get to a stage in their lives where they feel like it's too late. They can realize and go, actually, how have I got to this point? And what do I need to do to become a bit more self-aware?
Yeah, I love that. That's very similar to an analogy which I love to use, of you are on a ship sailing through life, and you need to be the captain of that ship and direct it where you want to go. Otherwise, it's just going to be wandering, floating around aimlessly. So yeah, I think it's bringing intention into our lives, isn't it? Of actually, I'm in the driver's seat here, as you say. I need to set the intention of where do I want to go? Otherwise, it's not going to necessarily be where we want to end up.
Indeed. I'm just going to take it right back then to the beginning, where we go through the aspiration stage. Now, was this something that you'd always wanted to do in terms of helping people and coaching, or was it a case of you aspired to have a greater control of your life yourself?
I think it really kind of organically developed for me, because I actually did an exercise about kind of finding your life purpose and your career, which is called Ikigai. I'm not sure if you've heard of that before. And at the end of it, I answered the questions, etc. I did the exercise, and the things that came up for me were like spirituality, empowerment, teaching, and I was kind of like, and also online business. So I was like, okay, an online business, I definitely want to do that because I can travel with it. And I love these things, but I'm not sure that it would actually be a career. I think that's going to be a passion project. And I had a lot of ideas of, how I could set that up in the future. And as this passion project, like once I had some money to fund it. And as I tend to do, like in my manifestation practice, I just tend to speed up my timelines all the time. So a couple of months later, after thinking, okay, maybe in 5 years I could do something like that. A couple of months later, it had just kind of organically snowballed into, okay, I'm going to be a manifestation coach. And it all just clicked so easily, and it just literally lit me up like nothing else ever had before. I was actually seeing these huge impacts on the people I was working with, and even just obviously the free content that I was sharing as well, hearing people say, wow, I really needed to hear this message right now, or this has inspired me to take action here, or do this, or stop worrying, was just so fulfilling. And that I kind of was like, this is amazing.
Oh, fantastic. You mentioned speeding up your timeline there. Now, this has happened to me quite often. I said the same sort of thing as you. 5 years' time, I would like to see this. And mine was for my book. I'd like to write a book in 5 years' time. And then all of a sudden, things have sort of snowballed and it's coming out in December. So why do you think that is the case? Is it in terms of like strong manifestations, or is there a particular sort of science to it?
That's such a great question. I think it's kind of, as we said before, it's setting that intention, because we have these limits in our brain and our timelines of, it's really our limits, our limiting belief, isn't it, that's kind of causing us to be like, oh, I think we'd need to wait, like, oh, I don't know if I'd be actually able to do that until this happens or until that. And really, in actual terms, those limits don't exist, they're just in our mind. So once we set the intention, energetically, the wheels start moving. And then if we are in a space where we have worked on our mindset a little bit, and where we are allowing ourselves to move through discomfort and fear and go for things, it just happens, because there's no reason why it shouldn't happen. And if we allow ourselves to do it, it does. However, if you also are not in that place yet, where you're not really going to allow yourself to jump into the things before you're waiting for that feeling of feeling ready, you're waiting to feel good enough, you're waiting for the outside circumstances to all line up completely perfectly, then that's when the timelines are a lot slower, because you're just not aligned to it. You're not ready for it yet.
Wow. And being ready for it and not being ready for it, that this sort of might come all at once to somebody who's quite new to what you're doing. All of these knockbacks and setbacks they might have had in their lives then start to come to fruition. We'll obviously get to that a little bit later on, but how would you initially guide somebody to be able to cope with that? Because I can speak for myself again, where I've been sort of wanting to manifest things over a period of time on a timeline, like you say, and then things have just started happening all at once. It's got pretty crazy. How would you maybe guide people through that?
Yes, absolutely. That's something that I've definitely heard. And I think someone asked me just the other day, I've been manifesting all these things, and now is it normal that they're showing up? And I'm thinking, oh my God, I actually don't know if I'm ready for this. Can I actually do this? And it's the fear that starts to really come in. So I can definitely relate to what you're saying there. And like you said, I've also experienced that as well. So I think for me, just the tool which I constantly love to refer back to is journaling. That works really well for me, because it allows you to kind of filter through your brain, like filter through the computer program, and get into what I call your higher self, and like your true consciousness, where we want to be operating from, not all those mind stories that come into things. So I would recommend anyone to use journaling to ask yourself, why am I feeling scared of these manifestations right now? Why am I feeling scared that all these opportunities are coming to me? And just posing that question to yourself and then allowing yourself to just start writing pen to paper and see what comes through has just been transformative for me. And at the end of the journaling session, when I've, gone through that process, I've asked myself the question, I've always come out with a way to move forward, and that it breaks that stagnation, it breaks that feeling of like deer in the headlights, and you're like, okay, I realize that this is just fear, I'm going to continue to move through it. Or maybe you're like, okay, I've actually now realized it's because of this, and this maybe wasn't the right manifestation. I thought I wanted it, but now it's come to me. I've realized it's not really aligned with my higher self, so I'm going to move in a different direction. But whatever happens at the end of it, you've worked through it, you've moved through it, you've moved out of just the crazy mind space, which is really confusing and hard to navigate, and you've got a way to move forward.
Oh, wow. And being in your higher self, that was one of the main key points I took from that answer. And being incredibly self-aware, being able to contextualize what's happening at that present moment in time. I agree with you. I found journaling so powerful because it allows me to just put my thoughts onto a page. And even if I'm trying to prioritize what I'm doing, it really does show up rather than trying to juggle a huge amount of things at once, and then maybe referring to the default option of let's just do the easiest thing to do and go from there. But actually having all of these manifestations, these plans, it allows you to tackle things that will benefit you the most rather than it being the easiest thing. In terms of then moving slightly away from that aspiration stage, you wanted to obviously come away from this present situation, well, the past situation, as it were. What was that past situation for you, and how did you then take the realization of I need to change?
That's a great question. For me, I think something that's really important for people to remember as they are going to continue through their journey is that often we have that one moment, like you said, that like before and after, like this is my old identity, now I realize I need to change. And often that's maybe you discover personal development, or you have a spiritual awakening, you start a journey of entrepreneurship. It happens a lot as well. And then it's this new identity. But the thing is, it continues to happen again and again. You're always needing to change, and we're always needing to shift. And I think sometimes it gets separated into this, like your old self and your new self, and now you're enlightened and now you're self-aware and it's all good. But really it's actually just continually checking back in, continually seeing what needs to change now, where do I need to go now. So I'd say that that's definitely something which I'm always doing. I'm always trying to look at, okay, what needs to change now, and continuing to evolve. But I think the moment what you're especially referring to is back when I wasn't aware of those things. And for me, it was a kind of interesting journey, because as a young child, like from the age of like 12, I was very interested in alternative things like spirituality and personal development, and I would actually read a lot on those subjects, and that was kind of a part of my life. And I was introduced to a lot of these topics which have helped me as an adult. But then as I went to secondary school, my confidence really dropped. It's a very difficult environment. I'm sure a lot of people have experience with that. And I just didn't ever feel like I really fit in with any friendship groups and in the environment. And it really spiraled from there for me. I didn't have a sense of myself. I wanted validation from outside, from other people. And that's kind of where I was. So I was looking for this outside validation. I was unsure of who I was, and that never feels good. So that's where the depression and the anxiety was really stemming from. And then, as you mentioned earlier, I started self-harming. I had suicidal thoughts, and I was just literally not enjoying life. Let's put it that way. So I was really, really lucky. And this is a big part of why I think that coaches are so important, because I was hugely lucky to have my sister, who's actually 16 years older than me, and she had a spiritual awakening around that time. And obviously I was able to view that as an example of what's possible. She moved to Ibiza and transformed her life, and really helped to introduce a lot of techniques to me, topics, ideas, and guide me through that process to allow myself to transform as well. And we can't be what we can't see. So I had that example to be like, oh, this is possible. People can achieve these huge goals that people think are crazy. People can do this. And I know that there are a lot of people who are in that place that don't have anyone in their life that have been through a journey like that, or who are actually living in their purpose, living from their highest self, and doing all these things. So I think it's really important. Now we have the internet, that we can connect with those people, even if you don't know anyone like that in your real life right now. You can look online for other people who are just like you. You know, whether, I think it's really important to have to like look for representation of yourself, like whatever your race is, your gender, your age. Look for people that are living in their purpose, in their highest self, and living the life that you would dream to live, because then it's showing to you that it's possible. So that's what happened to me with my sister, and my journey really snowballed from there.
So here's a message from one of our new sponsors, Trueform Clothing. Trueform Clothing are a gymwear brand, and their focus is making sure that you can perform to the very best of your abilities whilst in the gym, and provide comfort when you're not in the gym. The amazing range of men's and women's clothing that they have on offer is truly mind-blowing. So I very strongly suggest that you go and check it out using the link in my Instagram bio. And you can also get 10% off using the code JOHNT10. So that's JON, the letter T, and the number 10 to get 10% off, and it will massively help out the podcast as well. But the comfort, the style, and the performance all speak for itself. Really high quality clothing. Big thank you to Trueform Clothing for believing in the podcast and deciding to back us as well. So go and check them out at trueformuk.com.
Yeah, you make a great point about trying to find those people around you if you don't have them necessarily close to you, by being able to use the internet in a positive way. Mm-hmm. From my point of view, starting the Instagram accounts that I've got, I've found that there's so many positive people. There's such a great representation of that culture online if you look in the right place, because there is that society of the external validation, like you mentioned, and people who are posting pictures of, like, you know, these cars or whatever it is, and DM me this to learn this, and it's maybe not exactly linked to goals. So you mentioned about your sister wanting to sort of move away, start fresh. How do people find their sort of internal validation, their internal goals, rather than looking at somebody else and maybe envying it, but looking at somebody else and finding that's the good example?
Well, I think for me, something which I've talked about a bit online and has been really useful for people is the fact that everything in our reality is a reflection of the energy that we're sending out. So a lot of times when people start manifesting, they find that they start to see other people who are getting what they want. And that can make those feelings of jealousy come up, as you said, because you're like, they have it and I don't have it. What's going on here? So it's really important to remember that that's kind of a partial manifestation. That is the event arising in your life. It's just not as close to you as you would want it to be yet, but that is showing it is possible. If it's possible for that person, it's possible for you too. So that is such a blessing to see that. You know, if you couldn't see anyone doing it, how disempowering would that be for you? So I like to shift that into a gratitude moment and be like, thank you for this amazing inspiration, showing me what is possible for my life. So I think shifting it to gratitude rather than jealousy, and knowing that jealousy is really just an indicator of your desire. So using it as a tool to learn more about yourself as well, like we said about that self-awareness, which is really important. So I think when you shift it to a tool that you can use and to something that you can be grateful for, it really helps to alleviate those issues.
Well, what a fantastic way to reframe it positively as well. It's amazing to sort of see. Now it sort of springs to mind for me. I'm seeing a lot of people who are doing a lot of speaking engagements and things at the moment, and I'm there thinking, I'd love to have that why are all these people having these opportunities? So in terms of myself, I can reframe that and see it myself and try and manifest it and use it. Gratitude is the key word there, isn't it? Being grateful to notice that is happening. And another great point, if you didn't see it, then it would be quite sort of distressing. Yes.
Yeah.
So the initiation phase is when basically there is a decision to be made. Do you need to just start, or are you just going to do what a lot of people do and just kick back to just aspiring to things and dreaming of things rather than actually just beginning? I remember listening back to my first podcast the other week thinking, oh, this sounds horrible, but it was, I started, and it gets better each time, really. What was that moment for you?
That's a great question. What was that moment for me? Do you know, I don't think I can really pinpoint one moment. And I think the thing for me is I think you can probably relate, and a lot of other people, the more you get into the journey, you go through so many, like this cycle repeats itself, doesn't it? And it's like, every time you have a new goal, you decide to start a new career. For me, I've started businesses and things like that. So that moment of initiation comes up again and again. And I try to live by the kind of thoughts that action cures fear. So I just try to take action through the fear because it's always there. And the Marie Forleo quote that a great secret to success is to start before you're ready. So those are kind of the thoughts that trigger initiation for me, because I don't think anyone ever feels ready, really. And when you're waiting for that, it's not very productive. So once as we mentioned before, I've done my journaling, I've gone through my refining process of being like, yes, this is really what I want. I do feel like this is a decision from my higher self. But it's still scary. I'm still not sure about how this is going to work. Then that's when I just kind of remind myself of those thoughts and go for it. And that is a big thing with manifesting as well, that a lot of people get stuck on because of the idea of it. People think, okay, so I just need to think about it. I just need to write down what I want. And then they don't break through that initiation to the action phase. So it's always an idea, it's always in the thought form, and it never can break through into our physical reality because that energy exchange of the action isn't happening. So that's a great point.
Amazing answer. Yeah. In terms of then taking action, did you personally have, I'm relating it to sort of fear of the unknown, maybe fear of failure. Quite often people have fear of success as well. What actually will happen if I do that? Because then what do I do? What was your biggest fear in launching your coaching business?
So this is a great question, and I think it's something that you relate to more. For me, I've related to it more as the success has come, because I think a lot of the time we don't realize what our fears actually are, and we're always developing new ones. So that's why it's good to keep journaling, because I was very dissociated from that thought before. I would be like, no, give me all the clients, give me all the success, give me all of it, that's fine. I'm ready for that. I want that. And now it's starting to really snowball into fruition. I think that the biggest fear of success for me is maintaining the success, because before, when I was starting, I was going through all those phases that we've talked about. There was no success to lose. So it felt very much like, there was still fear, but at the same time, there was nothing to lose. Whereas now, the thing which I'm kind of soothing and moving through is, what if it all stops? What if it's a fluke? What if it's, what if it all goes away? And I think that that's going to continue to be something that I'll be working through, because each new level, that thought can come up again. Each new goal you reach, it's like, oh well, what if you don't continue to reach that? What if you go back? What if you lose it? And that's really what the fear of success is for me. And that's what I'm continuing to move through at the moment.
Yeah, I found that probably one of my biggest fears would be that fear of success, almost, because I'd be thinking, well, what, that imposter syndrome. What if I'm here because I don't deserve to be here? So that's one of maybe my limiting beliefs that I can hold my hands up and say does creep up on me every now and again. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, but I'd rather have that fear than fail. So even my fear of failure is sort of kind of driving me towards the fear of success, because they work sort of opposite each other. So I'd rather just have a go and feel like a bit of an imposter and get over it, because I know that I always get over it. I can journal, I can manifest, and it's fine, rather than staying where I am and remaining average in terms of my own, I suppose, achievements. Being average for me would be just staying at home, procrastinating, not doing anything.
That's a great point. So it's like the fear of feeling like an imposter is better than the feeling of just doing nothing and not achieving anything. Great.
It's sort of like, choose the better the devil you know, in a way, and sort of just get over it in a way. I want to go on to finding purpose in life, because this was some of the sort of points that fascinated me before the podcast. I think it's so hard to put a kind of point on, this is my purpose, this is what I found. It sort of comes towards me. That's probably because I'm not as, I don't know, aware or as awakened as you maybe are, where you can actually direct people to finding their purpose. How do you go about that? Because it must be such a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's really actually just guiding them to remove the layers of the world and society and our family and our friends and what we should be and what we shouldn't be, and all those fears and limiting beliefs. It's really just a process of like unpeeling that onion with all the layers to get to who you really are, and again back to that highest self and that vision of what decisions would your highest self be making, to kind of, and that's a way to kind of separate you from that ego voice and the voice of all the different people that we pick up along our childhood. So that's really what the journey looks like for me, and that's what I start with clients when in my program, is refining that. And we do a lot of work on core values through the purpose, and then we go into the vision. And it's not maybe as people would think, like you said, with that purpose, there's a lot of, I don't know if stigma is the right word, but there's a lot of kind of stories around these sorts of things, and they appear very overwhelming, very daunting, and very final. Like, okay, this is my purpose. My purpose is to be a doctor, and I don't think that, to me, that's not my vision of it. For me, your purpose is your reason for being, your reason for being alive. What can you look at in any situation, in any time of your life, and look at a small paragraph we usually come down to of, this is my reason for being alive. This is why it's still worth it for me to be here, and this is what is going to make me thrive. So that's very different for each individual person, and it's really a very like intimate journey of self-discovery that we go on.
Yeah, because obviously being a doctor, you could say that my purpose is to help others or heal others, but you can do that in many different careers, in many different ways. So keeping it more in terms of open would be, I would say, I agree with you there, because you can't say it's this, because then what if you achieve that and then you want to change again, like the cycle elements, the purpose cycle, you kick back to aspiration, it begins again. And that was certainly one of the things for me. My purpose, as it was, is to inspire and help people, towards their own goals. And I'm doing that as a school teacher, but now I'm trying to go into helping adults as well, and helping many different people and young professionals. So yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that one. There was one of the earlier podcasts in season 2, Andrew Miller, and his definition of purpose was something that could never actually be achieved. So it's amazing how different the viewpoint is on purpose, because that was one of the things that hit me. I was like, whoa, I'm not sure if that is that element to it, but I understand where he's coming from in terms of it changes, it evolves. But I think personally, if I flip it the other way around and reframe it, you can hit your purpose so many times, and you can keep doing it.
Yeah, I like that. And I think something which I often end up in a thought rabbit hole about is that fact that everything is both true and false. So like down the very spiritual, metaphysical pathway.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of what comes up for me with that is like, it's something that for me, purpose is something that you're achieving in every moment that you're breathing. And it's also something that will never be fulfilled. So it definitely kind of holds both truths. And yeah, that, like you said about having it not tied to one specific external goal, because to me a purpose is internal. It's not tied to any external factor, and that's why, as I said, you can be living that in every moment. You are helping people by whatever you're doing. You know, there's so many ways to fulfill that. As you said, maybe it's just in that moment you're just smiling at someone, or you're just being a happy energy in the room, and that is your way of fulfilling your purpose for yourself in that moment.
Yeah, it is. Wow. And true or false, you know, it can always be correct and incorrect in a way. That was a big sort of moment for me in that answer, really. And you are absolutely correct. It can be. You can interpret things and understand things in many different ways, and that the purpose actually, you could be constantly striving for, because that's what self-improvement's all about. It's not about just completing the A to B journey. And that was one of the things that wanted to help me, inspire me to write the book, really, because I'm going along 3 different timelines in my life where I've shown actually I've wanted purpose these 3 points, and I'm still doing it now. And that's the same for everybody, really. And that is my creation phase at the minute, in terms of trying to get that message across. What is your creation phase at the minute? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis to align with your higher self?
That's a fantastic question. And again, I think, as I kind of mentioned, I'm trying all the time, of course, to operate from my higher self and with connection to my higher self. So I try to really infuse that purpose into every moment, because for me, it is a lot to do with actually experiencing life, and me just doing that, me experiencing every moment, and allowing myself to be free to experience in that is an inspiration to others. And it's that like showing other people that they can do that too, even though there's a lot of limits that are put on us. You can just break through them limits and do it anyway. So I try to do that just by living in my truth, but then also obviously through my coaching, I am creating content on Instagram and TikTok where I am trying to further spread that message on a bit of more of a wider scale. And then more intimately, I am working with my one-to-one clients, which is so rewarding, being in that container where I'm literally guiding them through my framework, and seeing their results and seeing that transformation is obviously a very high level transformation for them, and also the thing that is really fulfilling for me. And back to the imposter syndrome that you mentioned as well, is that constant feedback for me that I am doing the right thing and that it is okay, because I'm seeing these people transform. So it gives me honestly that affirmation that I need as well.
Oh wow, yeah, and that's amazing. I want to talk to you in terms of the creation phase about the hustle mentality versus flirt. So one of the points that you mentioned prior to airing this episode, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, as you know, I do work mostly with spiritual entrepreneurs. So this is a huge thing that comes up, because we live in a society, I believe, that is very led by a masculine energy, which is both are very necessary and in balance, as you can see in nature, and that kind of yin yang idea of balance. So that the masculine energy is the force and the strategy and the planning and the getting it done kind of energy. And the feminine energy is really about being receiving rather than giving, and having rather than doing, and flowing. So it can be very difficult for spiritual entrepreneurs, and honestly, actually anyone, to not get caught up in that masculine energy of just only pushing forward, only achieving your goals, only doing, rather than having that time to allow yourself to receive, to allow yourself to integrate those things that you're doing, to nourish yourself and care for yourself. Because we have a society that kind of painted that as unproductive. You know, when you're working towards these big goals, you don't have time to be taking a bubble bath. But actually, to me, and in my journey of manifestation, that balance is actually key. So it's actually counterproductive to push too hard and to constantly try to be in this forceful energy. So to me, life is just a big balancing act, that the whole of life, through everything that I do and what I kind of observe around me. And this masculine, feminine hustle mentality and flow is a constant balancing experience for me as well. And it's the checking in with yourself, the knowing yourself, being connected to your higher self. So you have that discernment to be like, okay, I feel like I need to have a morning off. Is that coming from an ego, like laziness aspect? Is it because I'm moving through some fear and I'm trying to procrastinate from doing the action? Or is this coming from my higher self telling me that this is a moment that I need to allow myself to breathe and to expand and be in a position to receive? So it's constantly building that intuition and that discernment within yourself.
If I'm relating that back to what I was thinking all the way through that answer there, was how I can be pretty much bulletproof for like 4 weeks. Like I am going absolutely hard on everything, and I'm achieving my goals. I'm waking up early, journaling, operating on coffee, and I'm getting it done. But then, like you said, I think this was like one of the things that I've identified in the old me is like I burn out quite quickly. I can get things done and be super productive, but then I'll burn out quite a lot. And I mean, relating it to my day job as it was as a teacher, it does get to the point where there's things are sort of split into terms, and I can quite honestly admit that I act on that in terms of everything else that I'm doing. However, to be sustainable and to be continuously productive, you can't think of short-term sort of ways of working, and that is a fantastic way to make sure that you have the flow and you're using that energy to make sure it is sustainable, because I can certainly say that I need a little bit more of that in my life to make sure that I can continuously be sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think, like you said, sometimes we can get into that all or nothing, like black or white mentality of like, well, I'm going to do this for this 4 weeks or for this period. I'm just going to go hard. I'm just going to do it. But that oftentimes, like you said, does lead to burnout, and it doesn't feel good, and therefore we're not really creating with the best energy that we could be. So I do like to try to think of that balance as a daily thing and have a flow aspect in each day, and because it really is a priority for me.
Yeah, it's like the analogy of the hare and the tortoise. I suppose the hare burns out, the tortoise goes and wins, and that, I suppose, is relatable to life.
Bodybuilding Warehouse is a nutrition company that offer a wide range of health products that will allow you to perform at your very best. Now, in terms of recovery, in terms of general nutrition, I believe that is the foundation to building a healthier life, both physically and mentally, and Bodybuilding Warehouse have you covered in all of those departments. Anything in terms of weight loss, muscle building, improving your sleep, improving your hydration, or just making sure that you recover, Bodybuilding Warehouse have you covered. Now, Purpose Cycle podcast listeners can get 10% off with the code BWPurpose. That is BW Purpose. Use the link on my Instagram page to go and check it out, please. It will massively help out the podcast as well. And thank you once again to Bodybuilding Warehouse for sponsoring the episode.
So now into sort of the fruition phase, and how we can manifest that success, that future success. We often get little nuggets of fruition where we do something and get that pretty quick gratification. It might be getting that next client coming in or things like that. But what is the long-term fruition looking like for you, and how can listeners manifest their business success?
Yeah, that's great. I think important thing for that, for each person, is to know what is your fruition, like what are you bringing into fruition, and how will you be able to say, okay, yes, I have received this manifestation, I can show my gratitude for this, and kind of continue on, sit in it, or whatever we want to do. But I think like we all the way back to the start of this conversation, if you are driving in this car and you don't have the destination, you'll never know if you got there, because you didn't know where there was in the first place. So I think for me, before anyone, tries to come to any of these phases of creation and fruition, it's just so important. And even as you're moving through them, it's so important to keep going back to that initial phase of like clarity, to keep connecting back to where you're going, to connecting back to what the purpose is, why you're doing this. So I think that's a major thing, because what I've observed is that a lot of times, because we're all constantly manifesting, whether we realize it or not, and we're all achieving things like you said. And the thing is, because we didn't have them maybe written down, we didn't have them defined so clearly, they constantly passed us by. And then actually when we look back and be like, hold on a minute, 5 years ago, what did I want that I now have? And usually, 5-10 years ago, maybe even 1 month ago, we was thinking, oh, I'd like to do that. And now you've done them, you've got them, you have all these things, but we don't ever take that moment to be like, wow, I've manifested this. Wow, I've achieved this. Because we're just continuing on in the pace of life. So I think when you have things more clear, and especially that's why I love to write things down all the time, have a vision board, you can then get that moment of, yes, I have achieved this. And that's one of the practices that I love to incorporate into my vision board, is because a lot of people, it's a very popular practice, right? And a lot of people have it, but they don't kind of take it to the achievement. So then they're always in this energy of wanting and waiting, and when am I going to have this? But they never experience and enjoy that fruition energy and that fulfilled energy. So what I do is I actually take each picture that I manifest and I put it into an achievement box. So then you always have this store throughout the years of all of these things that you've manifested that were once on a vision board for you, and being able to go back to that box and reconnect to it and be like, look at all the things that have already come to fruition for me, is a really powerful experience.
Well, yeah, it reaffirms that it's possible and that you are going to do it, because historically everything that you've manifested correctly has come to fruition.
Yeah.
And I suppose that must be a really good practice as well for people who can quite often get lost up in success, because you see it quite a lot with, I mean, if I relate it to my sort of sporting background, a lot of young footballers might achieve their goal, they get the money, they get everything, and they sort of become disillusioned. It might be the same for we see a lot of child actors or Disney musicians or anything like that. They can get quite often so successful that it becomes quite blurred for them. So I suppose that really helps that clarity there as well.
Yes, it definitely does. And the appreciation, and humans just forget so easily. I feel like that's just our condition, our human condition is just constantly forgetting, and we're always wanting to strive to the next thing. And that's a great aspect. But again, it's that balancing act coming into play again. Because we will just forget all the things that we once wanted that we now have and take them for granted. So I think having something concrete to allow yourself to appreciate it, like you said.
Yeah, amazing. And we're going to now move on to some of the questions that we ask each of our guests. And we're going to start off with 3 values. What 3 values, if you have to narrow it down to 3, your top 3 values that you stand and live by?
Yeah, I love this. So values is a very big thing for me, and I do a lot of work with this with my clients as well. So I do have about 7 values that I like to live by, but to narrow it down to my top 3, I would say freedom is definitely number 1. And that means obviously so many different things to me, and it's hugely the driving force of my coaching business as well. So freedom is my first one. The second one is compassion, and that is radical compassion for everyone and everything, which I think is very taboo in our society, and something which a lot of people struggle with. And of course, it's still a daily struggle for me, but it transformed my life, adding that complete compassion for all and everything. And the third thing is communication, which I honestly think is the kind of cornerstone of every relationship. And so, like, whether that's your family, your friends, partners, whatever it is, and also just for you to be able to honestly move through your life with freedom, because a lot of the time I feel like boundaries and those sorts of things are a huge blocker for people, and have been a thing for me as well. So that's why communication in every aspect of life is a huge core value for me.
Amazing. And these values as well, they're quite open to your sort of own interpretation, which I like, because if I relate it back to freedom, the last 18 months, a lot of people may not have felt quite free because of, you know, lockdowns and things like this, having to stay off work. But that was that gave me the freedom, being at home and not being able to leave the house, gave me the freedom to start writing. So it's about how you reframe a particular situation to act in accordance with your higher self as well.
Absolutely, yes. And that's such a great point, because there's lots of moments again, just similar to the purpose. For me, I believe those things are internal and not affected by external situations within me. So if I am feeling that way, I always go back to the journal again and pose the question, why do I not feel free right now? And how am I free right now? And there's always a way to connect back to that freedom within myself. And similar to you, the past 12 months of being in lockdown has really excelled my freedom in a lot of different ways, with, you know, building online businesses and etc.
Oh, excellent. And in terms of, you know, building and moving on for the future, my final question, how can listeners make the next 12 months their best yet?
I would say, for number one, so this is actually based off of the framework that I take people through, is refine, release, and receive. So those are the three things that I would say for people to do over the next 12 months. First of all, refine and set your intention. What exactly do you want to see happen in the next 12 months? Where do you want to go in the next 12 months? Write it down. Second, I would say release. Once you wrote that down, what doubts, what ifs are coming up for you? Write them all down and see which ones are actually serving you, which ones are coming from your higher self, and which ones are you ready to release. And I'm very, you know, symbolic and woo-woo, so I like to burn that piece of paper that you wrote all those what ifs down and just allow it to release. And third, be open to receive. So that's building that self-love and that self-worth, to know that you are ready to receive it, that you're open to receive it, and believing that you're worthy, because that once you've done those things, a lot of times that self-love and that self-worth and self-belief is that last block to release.
Wow. Yeah. And refine, release, receive. That's the framework there. And I very much recommend anybody to sort of go through that process themselves. Final bonus question, Minnie, how can listeners find you?
Yes, so they can find me on Instagram at Minnie Courtney, Minnie Minnie. And yeah, you can find all my connections from there.
Oh, fantastic. Well, one of the biggest sort of quotes that stuck through me through the episode with me is, the great secret to success is to start before you're ready. I really enjoyed that quote. And I'd just like to thank you so much, Minnie, for appearing on the Purpose Cycle podcast.
Thank you. I'd love to thank you for having me, and, you know, anyone who's listened. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Yes, definitely. If you're listening, guys, please go and check out Minnie on her socials. Some fantastic content there. Great message as well. And thank you all for listening. See you next week.
Watch me not stop, though.